Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis, and in this video I'm going to go through some Photoshop, but something just a little bit different, because this video is specifically for those folks who do not have the latest and greatest versions of Photoshop. Alright, so it used to be that the only time you'd ever find yourself using Camera Raw was right at the start of your retouching when you were opening your RAW file. However, going back a few updates now, Adobe introduced Camera Raw as a filter, meaning that at any stage in your retouching you could dive in and out of the Camera Raw filter and make use of everything that it has available. Now, of course, there are people out there who choose, for whatever reason, not to be on the Creative Cloud or the latest and greatest versions. So they're kind of missing out on what is a fantastic introduction into Photoshop. So I thought I'd put together a bit of a workaround to show how you can overcome the fact that you're not using the latest and greatest versions. Now, it's not perfect. There are a few steps to it, but if you stick to watch the very end of the video, you'll see a way that I've also shown how to record an action to streamline it even further. Now, of course, you can't beat having the filter there as a one-click press, but I think this is a pretty good workaround. So let's dive in and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so let's start off then by going through how you use the Camera Raw filter in the latest and greatest versions of Photoshop. So if you look at the picture we've got on screen here, this is kind of partially retouched picture of one of mine called Rosa. And when we look in the layers panel, the very top part here we've got a group, and this contains all the colour adjustments I've done to get to this particular stage. Now, for me to send this into Camera Raw, I can't send the group. I need to have a merged layer. So we'll do that by holding down the Shift, Control, Alt and E keys on PC, which on Mac will be Shift, Command, Option and E. That creates a merged layer at the top of the layer stack. Let's just double click on that to rename it Camera Raw. Then we'll go to the filter menu over in the top left hand corner there, and we've got the option here of Camera Raw filter. Now, if you were going to be working non-destructively, this is where you might want to choose first of all to convert for smart filters, and that gives you the option of adjusting any filters that you use at a later date. Say if you've done too much or not enough, you can always alter it later on, but just for speed, let's just dive straight into the Camera Raw filter. So here we are able now to use everything that Camera Raw has on offer, but just for now we'll just choose the radial filter and we'll click and drag that around just a little bit, reposition it just a touch, and then just use exposure just to control the lighting in the picture. So just for something like that, and then we'll click OK. And now we could then carry on with the rest of the retouching. But that's all well and good for those folks who have the latest and greatest version with all the updates of Photoshop, and they do have Camera Raw available to them as a filter. But what do you do if you're using older versions of Photoshop that don't actually have that? First things first, we're going to go to the image menu and we're going to choose duplicate. In the little dialog box that appears here, let's call this one Camera Raw and then click OK. So what we have now then, we now have two tabs at the top of the screen, the left hand tab being the original picture with all the layers, and the right hand tab, the one that we've just called Camera Raw, which is identical with all the layers as well. But for this duplicate, we don't actually need to keep all the layers. So what I'm going to do is go to the layer menu and choose Flatten Image. So you'll notice no difference in the picture other than in the layers panel, all the actual layers now being compressed into one single background layer. At this point, we'll go to the file menu, choose Save As, and I'm going to navigate to my desktop. Let's just go to the desktop, and I'm going to see here in the file name, it's called it Camera Raw, which is what we originally called the duplicate, and we'll keep the same extension here. I like to work in TIFF images in Photoshop. You might just use PSD or whatever, but I'll just keep it the same, and we'll click Save. Once it's saved it, we'll then close. We'll just click OK there. We'll just click Close because we don't need this duplicate anymore. Now, the trick to open that file up in Camera Raw is this. Go to the File menu and choose Browse in Bridge. This will now open up Adobe Bridge, and we can navigate to the desktop. Here is our file that we've just saved on the desktop, and we go to the File menu and choose Open in Camera Raw. So at this point, everything looks like it did when I first showed you how to do this if you had the latest and greatest versions. So just like before, we can come in now. Let's just choose that radial filter. Click and drag out that radial filter around Rosa, just reposition it. We can use the exposure just to control that lighting just a little bit, and then we can click at the bottom right hand corner here to open image. Now you've got a couple of options at this stage here. You might be somebody who likes to work non-destructively, like I mentioned a moment ago, where you can always go back and alter filters if you want to at a later stage. Now you can send the image here into Photoshop as a smart object, and there's a couple of ways you can do that. The first way, if you look underneath the picture, you've got the information bar here, which tells us what color space we're in, the bit depth, dimensions, the pixels per inch, and so on and so forth. If you click on that information bar there, this dialog box appears, and in the bottom left hand corner, you can put a little tick in this checkbox that says open in Photoshop as smart objects. Once you then click OK, every time you work on a picture in Camera Raw, it will always send it to Photoshop as a smart object. Now I don't actually do that. Let's just cancel that. All I tend to do is just choose as and when I want to have the picture as a smart object by coming down to where it says open image, and if I hold down the shift key it changes to open object. See, that's without the shift key. Where it says open image, hold down the shift key, it says open object. So now when I click on that, it'll then send that file over into Photoshop, and you can see here in the bottom right hand corner it's a smart object. Now I get my move tool, press V on the keyboard, get my move tool, click down on the picture, drag upwards on top of the tab that contains the original picture with all the layers in. I keep my button held down, I drag into my picture, hold down the shift key, and then release. Now the reason I keep the shift key held down is because when we release, it puts that file perfectly centered so everything lines up. So you can see now, if we go before, after, everything is lined up perfectly. And the great thing about this is it looks just like it did if you had the latest and greatest versions of Photoshop, but because we sent it as a smart object, if I double click on the thumbnail, it will then give me the flexibility of coming back into Camera Raw, and if I wanted to, I could actually then change any of the things that I did previously. So any of the actual settings that I messed about with in Camera Raw, I can come in and change these in real time, click OK, send it back into Photoshop, and then carry on with the retouching. So now that we've gone through that workaround, let's look at how we can streamline it and make it much quicker by recording an action. So first of all, then let's just get rid of this layer at the very top there, because we need to now record every step again into an action. So we'll go to the window menu and choose actions. And I've got a folder here called Glynn's Actions. We'll click on the icon at the bottom to create a new action, and we'll call this one Camera Raw Filter, and then press record. So now that every single step I go through is being recorded into this action for us to use later. So the workaround, let's have a look at all the steps we went through. We started off by going to the image menu and then duplicate, and in the dialog we're here, we called it Camera Raw, and then clicked OK. So now we've got the duplicate copies. We didn't need all the layers, so we go to the layer menu and choose flatten image. That then completely flattens all those layers. Then we went to the file menu, choose save as. Obviously the file name is what we called the duplicate. I keep the extension exactly the same as what it is that I'm originally working on, which for me is a TIFF. You can use whatever you want. And we navigate to the desktop and then just click save. And once it's saved, we'll then just click OK there. Once it's saved, we'll then just close down the duplicate because we don't need that anymore. Then we go to the file menu and choose browse in bridge. So now that bridge is open, there's nothing more that we can record in this action in Photoshop. So let's go back to Photoshop and just stop the recording just there. Let's just close that down. But you can see all the steps in the action just here. But let's just close it down so it doesn't get too big. So alright, so now let's have a look how much quicker this makes this whole process now that we do have an action. But before we do that, let's just get rid of that Camera Raw TIFF file on the desktop and start from scratch again. Alright, so now then, in the layers panel, we're at the stage where we want to use Camera Raw as a filter, but we don't have the latest version, but we do have this action that we've now recorded. So let's just click on that action and press play. So what's going to happen is Photoshop will create that duplicate, it'll rename it Camera Raw, it'll flatten all the layers, it will save it to the desktop, and then it'll bring us into Bridge where we can actually see that file just here. Now, we don't actually need to go to File and Open in Camera Raw. To help things go even quicker, we can do a keyboard shortcut now of holding down the Control key on PC or Command key on Mac and pressing R on the keyboard to send that straight into Camera Raw. So this is really quick. And let's just go and do that radial filter or whatever it is that you wanted to do in Camera Raw, but we'll just kind of keep everything the same here. So radial filter, I'll send it over as a smart object by doing the Shift key and clicking on Open Object. It sends it over into Photoshop. We get the Move tool, we click down, drag across on top of the tab containing the original picture, keep the key held down, drag it into the picture, hold down the Shift key, then release so that it is lined up perfectly, and then we can go before, after, and now we can carry on with the retouching. So with that action and that keyboard shortcut, it's actually quite a quick, streamlined process. So there you go, there's a few steps involved there, but the reason I recorded this video was because I'd had a few emails from folks who got my Rosa tutorial that I released recently, and they kind of said that they don't have the latest version of Photoshop, so how can they still do the steps that I do when I go to Camera Raw as a filter to do this kind of lighting effect. So I'm kind of hoping that works there. But like I say, it's not perfect, but recording that action definitely makes a difference. But that's all I've got for you in this video. As always, if you haven't already, click on that subscribe button. I really do appreciate the support there, and put a little press down that bell icon as well, because when I'm doing live videos, live YouTube broadcasts, it'll let you know that they're about to happen. So that's what that bell icon is for there. But that's pretty much it. I'll catch you in the next video.